To understand how power works, don't stand in the boardroom. Stand in the shadows and listen to who gets ignored. 6:02 a.m. The towering glass building of Accenture Corporation pierced the morning fog like a monument to ambition. On the surface, it looked pristine, sleek, modern, unstoppable. But beneath the glow of polished tile and stainless steel elevators, something darker festered. Inside, a man pushed an old mop bucket across the marble floor. His back hunched slightly, his gray janitor uniform too big for his athletic frame. No one noticed his sharp, observant eyes as they scanned every corridor, every door, every camera. He moved slowly, purposefully, like a man with nowhere to be. But this man owned the entire building. His name was Caleb Thorne, and he wasn't just any CEO. He was the founder and chairman of a $12 billion empire. No one recognized him. After all, no one pays attention to the janitor. 2 months ago, Caleb had grown suspicious. He'd received an anonymous letter from a former employee, a quiet young woman from the finance department who had resigned without saying a word. The letter read, "There is rot in your company, sir. People are being hurt. Someone in a high place is abusing their power and silencing the ones who speak up. Please, and don't trust the smiling faces on the 32nd floor." That letter burned in his mind like wildfire. He tried to investigate through official channels. HR denied any issues. Legal found no red flags. His COO brushed it off with a laugh. But Caleb had built Accenture from nothing. He knew when something wasn't right. So he made a decision only a man like him could make. He vanished from the public eye, cut his hair, grew a beard, and put on the uniform of a night janitor named Marcus Green. Only two people knew the truth: his personal assistant, Naomi, and the head of private security, whom he trusted with his life. And now, after 6 weeks of working from the shadows, taking out trash, scrubbing toilets, and listening to conversations people didn't realize were dangerous, he had a name: Vanessa Coyle, director of corporate operations, charismatic, smart, ruthless, and behind closed doors, monstrous. The first time Caleb encountered her, he wasn't even supposed to be on her floor. He had been fixing a leaky faucet in the executive kitchen when he heard her voice echo down the hallway like a whip crack. "Who left this damn folder here? You think I'm your maid? Clean it up before I have you cleaning the parking garage with a toothbrush." Caleb peeked from around the corner. A young intern, barely 20, was trembling as Vanessa loomed over him in her red blazer and heels like a general ready to strike. The intern apologized. She smacked the folder off the counter. "Useless," she hissed. "You people are all the same. No backbone, no brain." Caleb's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, just kept scrubbing the sink and listening. Over the next few days, he saw more. Vanessa yelling at her team in meetings behind closed glass doors, forcing employees to stay late with veiled threats, making HR reports vanish, manipulating numbers to meet impossible goals, then blaming underlings when things fell apart. And every time someone raised a concern, they disappeared, resigned, terminated, transferred out quietly. But what made Caleb's blood run cold was what happened one Friday morning. He was mopping near the elevators when Vanessa strutted by, talking loudly on her Bluetooth headset. She didn't notice him. "Listen, I don't care who his dad is. If the kid can't keep up, I'll make sure he doesn't last 2 more weeks. I'll have him sign a performance review so tight he'll think it's a lawsuit." "Trust me." Caleb blinked. He recognized the name she mentioned: Jordan Wells, a junior analyst, and the son of a black community leader Caleb personally supported through scholarships. Jordan was smart, honest, but shy, a perfect target for someone like Vanessa. That's when Caleb made up his mind. He would expose her, not with words, not through memos or warnings, but with undeniable proof, with justice, and it would start today. By noon, Vanessa was in her office, barking orders into a speakerphone while painting her nails. "Move the R&D team to floor 7. Fire the 2 slowest. And get that janitor out of my hallway. He smells like bleach and old regret." She laughed at her own joke. Caleb stood just outside her glass door, wiping down the windows. He looked calm, even indifferent. But inside, he was calculating every word she said, logging every face he saw enter and exit. What Vanessa didn't know was that Caleb had already planted micro cameras in the server room, and a live feed was being recorded and reviewed by his legal team off-site. But what came next wasn't part of his plan. At 6:45 p.m., when most employees had gone home, Caleb stayed behind to clean the executive kitchen on the top floor. Vanessa stormed in, furious. "You again?" she snapped. "How many times do I have to tell you people not to be seen? Janitors should be invisible. Do I look like someone who enjoys being watched while I eat?" Caleb turned to face her, calmly. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am," she scoffed. "Your job is to shut up and mop. God, why do they always send people like you?" He paused. "People like me," she smirked. "Don't play dumb. The slow ones. The ones who pretend to work hard so no one notices how little they do." He looked her dead in the eyes and smiled. "Noted," he said quietly, then picked up his mop and walked away. That night, Caleb met with Naomi and the head of security. He handed over a flash drive containing weeks of recordings, verbal abuse, threats, falsified documents, and evidence of blackmailing HR staff. By morning, legal teams were in motion. Vanessa had no idea that every email she'd sent over the past 6 months was being audited by federal compliance officers. The trap was set, but Caleb wasn't done. He wanted everyone to see what abuse of power looked like. He wanted every intern, every assistant, every overlooked worker in the building to witness the reckoning, because justice wasn't quiet. Justice had a name, and tomorrow morning, everyone would learn exactly who Marcus the janitor really was. True power isn't loud, it's patient. It waits in silence until the moment it no longer has to ask permission. 8:29 a.m. Monday. The Essentra Corporation lobby pulsed with its usual rhythm, heels clicking across tile, coffee orders shouted from the cafe kiosk, employees swiping badges with half-focused eyes. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. A new kind of energy lingered in the air, like a storm cloud no one could see, but everyone could feel. Vanessa Coyle walked into the building like she owned it. Red heels, power suit, hair pulled tight. Her stride was sharp, her smirk unbothered. She hadn't a clue that this would be the last day she'd ever walk into Essentra as a free woman. She passed Marcus, the janitor she'd ridiculed the week before, without a second glance, and Caleb Thorne, hiding in plain sight, simply nodded to her with the same humble politeness she mistook for weakness. But upstairs, the walls were already closing in. 9 a.m., 32nd floor. Vanessa entered the executive conference room expecting the usual Monday rundown with the leadership team. Instead, she walked into silence. No assistants, no coffee, no board members chatting about numbers. Only 5 people sat at the table, stone-faced, composed. Among them, Naomi Graves, executive assistant to the chairman, Stephen Knox, head of legal affairs, Isaiah Mendez, director of security, FBI agent Lila Cohen. And at the far end, a tall man in a navy blue suit with his back to her. Vanessa blinked. "Is this a private meeting?" The man at the end turned around slowly, and for the first time in 6 weeks, Caleb Thorne removed the disguise. No janitor uniform, no mop in hand, just the sharp, unmistakable gaze of a man in full control. Vanessa froze. Her mouth parted slightly. Mr. Thorne," she breathed. "You're—" "I've always been here," Caleb said quietly. "You just never looked close enough." For a moment, no one moved. The air thickened. Then Caleb leaned forward, placed a black folder on the table, and opened it. Inside, dozens of pages, screenshots, transcripts, surveillance stills, audio recordings, evidence. "Vanessa Coyle," he said, his voice like iron wrapped in velvet. "You stand accused of workplace abuse, document tampering, blackmail, falsification of performance records, and obstruction of internal investigations." She laughed nervously. "Is this some kind of prank? This can't be real. You're the janitor. You were—" "I was watching," Caleb said, "while you made interns cry, while you erased complaints from HR systems, while you threatened a young analyst for having a father with a public voice." He paused. "You abused my people. You bullied the vulnerable. You buried talent under fear. You didn't just break rules, you broke lives. Vanessa backed away a step. This is ridiculous. You're making a mistake. I've done everything this company asked. I hit my metrics. I delivered. This is political. No, Naomi interrupted, her voice calm, surgical. This is accountability. The door opened behind Vanessa. Two federal officers stepped in, flanking her on either side. You are under federal investigation and have the right to remain silent, one officer began. Any attempt to flee or destroy company property will result in immediate escalation of charges. Vanessa's face drained of color. No, wait. She turned to Caleb. You don't understand. I was under pressure. Everyone's numbers were low. I had to make tough decisions. You can't fire me for that. I'm not firing you, Caleb said, standing. I'm exposing you. 10 a.m. Company-wide broadcast room. Caleb wasn't interested in hiding anything behind closed doors. He wanted his employees, the ones who stayed quiet, endured silently, and believed no one was listening, to see this moment. The live feed flickered on. Screens across all 47 floors of Essentra displayed Caleb's face as he stood behind the podium. Good morning, he began. This is Caleb Thorne, and for the past 6 weeks I've been working undercover as your night janitor. The room went silent. I did it because I received a letter, one letter, from someone brave enough to speak when the system had failed her. And that one letter revealed more than any audit or board meeting ever could. He paused, voice steady. I saw what you endure. I saw who protects and who preys. And today, one of those predators was removed in handcuffs. Shockwaves rippled through every floor. People stared at their screens, some with mouths agape, others with tears brimming. Interns who thought no one noticed. Associates who had feared for their jobs. And quiet employees who had once whispered Vanessa's name like a curse behind closed doors, now watching her downfall unfold in real time. Back in the executive floor's break room, a janitor named Luis turned to another custodian and whispered, So, he really is the boss? The other man nodded slowly. And he mopped next to me for 3 nights straight, treated me better than my last 3 managers combined. Meanwhile, downstairs in HR, Jordan Wells watched the feed with wide eyes, the same young analyst Vanessa had threatened. A smile broke across his face for the first time in weeks. When Caleb stepped away from the camera, Naomi joined him in the hallway. You sure you're ready for the blowback? She asked gently. I welcome it, he said. Let them talk. Let every executive in this building understand that rank doesn't shield you from decency. She nodded. Also, he added, I want you to find the woman who sent that letter. Quiet girl. Finance department. We owe her more than thanks. 11:45 a.m. Parking garage. Vanessa was loaded into a black federal vehicle in full view of dozens of shocked employees. Her eyes darted, desperate, pleading. But no one looked away. No one stood up for her. Because they all knew. They had seen what she did. They had felt it. And now, she was alone. As the door slammed shut, Caleb watched from the corner of the garage, arms folded. One officer nodded at him in respect. Justice wasn't always loud, but today it roared. Later that evening, Caleb returned to his penthouse office, not as a janitor, not as a spy, but as himself. He looked out across the city skyline and finally allowed himself a quiet exhale. 6 weeks of silence, 6 weeks of pretending, and now it was done. But something inside him had shifted forever. Maybe this company didn't need more policies. Maybe what it needed was leaders willing to get their hands dirty to find the truth. When the powerful forget who they serve, it takes the unseen to remind them. And sometimes, the smallest voice becomes the loudest echo. 2 weeks later, the dust had settled. The headlines had moved on. Executive arrested in corporate abuse scandal had trended for 3 days, then disappeared into the void of the news cycle. But inside Essentra, the aftershocks were just beginning to reshape the foundation. Employee surveys surged with honesty for the first time in years. Internal investigations were reopened. Whistleblower protections were doubled. A new HR director, a woman who had once been demoted for refusing to lie, was reinstated and promoted. And Caleb Thorne, He was no longer just the face on a Forbes cover. He was now a myth among his own staff, the janitor chairman, the man who mopped his way into the truth. But there was one thing he hadn't yet done. Find her, March 14th, 6:03 p.m., Basement Archives. Her name's Danielle Acker, Naomi said, flipping through a dusty old file box. She resigned quietly 3 months ago, she continued. Finance intern, top of her class. No HR complaints filed, but every person I spoke to remembered her as kind, soft-spoken, always stayed late, never caused trouble. Caleb frowned. And she just vanished? After she left, she moved out of state. No forwarding address. But, Naomi paused. I found this, buried in a shared drive. She handed him a folded piece of paper. Typed, simple. It read, I didn't write this to get anyone fired. I wrote it because I still believe Essentra can be what you promised it would be. A place for people like me. People who don't have connections, who have to work twice as hard just to be seen. I hope someone reads this, even if no one remembers my name. Caleb stared at the words for a long time. Then, quietly, he sat down. His empire was built on resilience, on vision, on believing in the underdog. And yet somehow, Danielle had seen more than he did. From the lowest rung of the ladder. She was the kind of person he claimed to fight for, and she almost disappeared without a trace. 1 week later, Caleb flew across 3 states to find her. She was working in a small accounting firm outside Chicago, living in a modest apartment, still wearing the same coat from her intern days. When he showed up at her door, she looked confused, then stunned, then terrified. I'm not in trouble, am I? She asked. He smiled. No, Danielle, quite the opposite. The next day, Caleb brought her back to Essentra, not to apologize, to honor her. He walked her through the main lobby, now featuring a permanent installation, the listening wall, where employees could leave anonymous feedback, ideas, and concerns. Beside it hung a bronze plaque, in honor of those who speak up when it's hardest to be heard. Danielle didn't cry, not at first. She just stood there, breathing heavily, like someone finally being seen. But when Caleb handed her an offer letter to return, not as an intern but as chief ethics advisor, the tears came silently. Not because she felt powerful, but because she finally felt safe. The real twist? A week after Danielle's return, Caleb received a package at his private office. No name, no return address. Inside, a flash drive. On it, video footage, recorded on a personal phone. It showed Vanessa 4 months earlier, pushing a young janitor against the wall in a storage room, screaming at him to clean faster while throwing files to the floor. The boy was barely 17, part-time, working nights while finishing high school. Caleb stared at the footage, his hands shaking with fury. The boy's name, Eli Marcus Jameson, and 3 weeks after that video, he had disappeared. No one had heard from him since. No resignation, no call, no trace. The final straw. Caleb hired a private investigator, and what they uncovered broke him. Eli had suffered a mental breakdown. He'd been living in a shelter under a false name, too ashamed to return home, too scared to explain why he left his job. Vanessa's verbal and emotional abuse had shattered him in a way even Caleb's justice hadn't repaired. Caleb flew to the shelter, sat beside Eli for hours, never said a word about his position, only listened. At the end, Eli said quietly, "She told me I'd never be more than a broom, that people like me don't get to matter." Caleb gritted his teeth, then stood. "You do matter, Eli. You always did. You just didn't have anyone watching your back." 2 months later, Essentra launched a new foundation in Eli's name, the Jameson Initiative, offering full scholarships, trauma therapy, and job training for marginalized youth entering the workforce. And on the anniversary of Vanessa's arrest, Caleb gathered every employee in the main auditorium. There were no big announcements, no press, only a simple message on the screen. Justice begins when we listen, and it ends when we forget who we work for. Then the lights dimmed and a spotlight fell on the stage. Danielle stood beside Eli, now healthy, enrolled in college, and working part-time in Essentra's outreach program. The crowd stood, Applause thundered, and for the first time in a long time, Caleb Thorne felt something he hadn't felt. Even as a billionaire, pride, not in numbers, not in dominance, but in humanity. Final scene, office rooftop, night. Caleb stood alone under the stars. A breeze tugged at his coat. Below, thousands of lights blinked across the city. Naomi approached. "So, are you going back undercover again?" He chuckled. "Number, I think I've done enough sweeping for one lifetime." She handed him a small package. Inside, a worn-out janitor's ID badge that read, Marcus Green. Caleb smiled, then placed it into his chest pocket. Not to forget, but to remember where he came from, what they almost lost, and who truly keeps the world turning. Final line for the video narrator, with music rising. Sometimes the janitor isn't just cleaning up the mess, he's rebuilding the whole damn system.